how do you envision your life as a writer? Do you imagine fame and fortune becoming a household name like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, Neil Gaiman, George R.R. Martin? Or do you want your stories and worlds to captivate people like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Harry Pratchett's Discworld, C.S. Lewis's Narnia? Or do you just want to quit your job and make a full-time income writing books? I'm here to tell you, those are not good goals. And it's not because I don't understand, and it's not because I don't secretly have the same goals, but it took me a bit into my writing career to realize that I can't really control those kind of things. Those kind of goals will leave you with a lot of disappointment, because as you can control the output, you can't control how people respond. This means you can't control fame and fortune. You can't control becoming a household name. You can't control your reputation. You can influence how many books you sell by how well you market, but you don't actually get to decide the final numbers. Therefore, you don't really have a say in how much income you make. And you have no say in what reviews people are going to leave you. If your goals are related to currency, reputation, or anything of that sort, you're probably going to be disappointed. So let me help you rebuild your goals as a writer. We need to look at 3 things to build your goal as a writer. The first is your motivation. So the question is, why do you write? Why do you want to be a writer? And for a lot of us, the answer is going to be, oh, I've always wanted to be a writer, and I've wanted to write since I was little because I love books. But what is the specific moment you decided to write? For me, it was reading Lloyd Alexander's The Black Cauldron. I was a huge Lloyd Alexander nerd when I was young. I loved Lloyd Alexander so much. I loved all of his stories. I collected every story I could find. I even wrote to his publishing company because I wanted to speak to him personally. I wrote letters to Lloyd Alexander, and he actually wrote me back on his little typewriter that he wrote all of his books on. And he was just the sweetest man. And what really was a turning point for me was The Black Cauldron. The Black Cauldron was such a well-written book. The characters were really memorable. But most of all, I really loved the redemption arc in the villain. And the entire book is basically about good and evil and some gothic themes and zombie skeleton armies. And Lloyd Alexander always weaved these great characters and also some philosophical ideas as well. Just very gently, because he wrote for children. But it was just very well done. So after reading that book, I wanted to become a writer just like him. So my motivation for writing comes from this admiration of stories like Lloyd Alexander's that have this human redemption theme with a slight bit of darkness and unforgettable characters with some romance and some action, and adding in those little tiny pieces of reflection and philosophy and humanity. I think it's just amazing storytelling. And I found that stories of good and evil and human redemption just captivate me the most. Also, to me, I believe that storytelling is one of the most important elements of human existence. And I really mean that. Stories give people hope, they give people reflection, they give people insight, they give people courage and motivation, inspiration. They show consequences and rewards. They present good and evil in a chewable form. And it's a great way to just purge emotions. So think about what motivates you. Why do you write? You don't have to pick one option. You can choose as many options and motivators as you want. And once you have your motivation, you need to think about your audience. And I don't mean this from a sales perspective, although that will come into play later. What I really mean is, what types of books are you writing and who are they for? When I first started writing, I tried writing fantasy because Lloyd Alexander is a fantasy writer and I wanted to be like him. But I quickly learned that I don't like world building. I'm far more interested in the characters and how they interact with each other, adding a lot of drama and suspense and people getting punched in the face. So after writing in a bunch of different styles, I realized I like romance best. And I chose that not because romance sells well, but it's because what I enjoy writing. So this brings me to the next question: who are my romance novels for? So while fantasy can be for all ages usually, romance and some other genres like maybe really graphic stories or crime stories, those require an appropriate age. So I had to make a decision on which age group I wanted my books. So I had to make a decision on what age group I wanted my books to be directed towards. Now, there's always the choice of young adult. Young adult is very famous for romance. When I was young, teen romance was just like a kiss here and there, or the implication that something happened behind closed doors. These days, you can kind of get away with a lot of things in YA fiction. There's actually not many limits. In fact, you might want to pull back a bit, like, God. But there's also other genres of romance as well. There is new adult romance, there is adult romance, there's second chance romance, which is basically people who have gotten divorced and get married again. So you have to have a gap between the time people got married the first time and then divorced and then got married the second time. So there's a lot of different age groups. So you'll want to start with how old is your character? What kind of life experiences are they going through? And what's the topic of the book? For me, I ended up choosing new adults because all of my characters are in their early 20s, transitioning from child to adult, from teenager to full adult, in that transition phase. And in that phase, they're not only transitioning from child to adult, but they're also shifting perspectives as well. Their perspective of themselves and the people around them is also changing. Now, this doesn't mean that all of my books are for that age. I am planning to write some books for just regular adult demographic, but you can kind of decide your main group that you usually write for, or when you write a series or book, decide who is this book for. And the last thing you need to decide with your writing goal is how much output will you create. This is where most self-help for writing kind of settles on. They tell you how to make a writing schedule, word count, editing hours, and I would be happy to make a video on all of those things. But let me give you a quick overview of what I do. So my goal is to publish one book per year. And it doesn't sound like a lot, especially in the era of rapid indie release, where people will tell you that you should release a book every like 3 months or 3 weeks or something. I'm not much interested in that kind of rat race. My goal is not quantity. So your output goal might be quantity, and that's something you have to decide. But that amount of quantity just stresses me out, and I don't think I would actually enjoy writing if I had to write that much. Now, for me, for each book, the setting is completely different, and it takes a lot of research for me to get my books where I want them to be. My first book, The Five Princes, took place in an imaginary country, and it was the first of the Choose the Ending books that I wrote, so it took me like 2 years to write, because I had to figure out the dynamics of writing a book with multiple endings. My second book, The Rebellion, however, I was just obsessed with, and I wrote the whole thing in like 8 or 9 months. But my newest book that comes out next year, that one I think I started like 4 years ago. But I have written about 1 or 2 books per year, and I have published a book every year. So I am meeting my goal. I'm happy with my goal. It doesn't stress me out. So I have a system where I always have one book in rough draft status. I am writing the draft. Then I have one book in editing status. I am editing the rough draft. And then I have one book in production. It has gone to an editor. It is going through marketing. And then sometimes I do short projects for a break, or I have some ideas and I will just mind dump for a week or 2. And to me, that's productive and very doable. If I am stuck or am procrastinating on project 1, I can do project 2. If these 2 are just not working together, I can work on project 3. And I don't do more than that, because if I do more than those 3 projects, 1 in rough draft, 1 in edit, and 1 in production, then I will not finish any of them. So I just stick with the 3, and then I just hop between the 3, so I'm always producing something. But I can't do more than this. I don't enjoy doing more than that. And in a lot of ways, I can't afford to do more than that. So that is my output. So again, the hardest thing to accept when making your goal as a writer is that you can control your output, but you can't control the response to your output. So while I still have that hidden dream, or not so hidden dream, I'm pretty arrogant, of fame and fortune. I can't really make that my goal, but my actual goal is really long. So my goal as a writer is to publish 1 romance book a year for new adults transitioning into adulthood, for the purpose of exploring good and evil in the human spirit, giving my readers a moment to reflect on relationships and how they affect us, while also providing a means of catharsis to the audience. Because great authors like C.S. Lewis, Oscar Wilde, Terry Pratchett, and Lloyd Alexander have all done that for me. That is my goal. So think about those 3 things. Yet again, what is your motivation? What books do you like enjoying, and who are they for? And what kind of output can you sustain? If you're still having trouble deciding your goal as a writer, check out my blog post. I'll be putting a little questionnaire on there to help you figure out what your writing goal is. If this was helpful, leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you beautiful tigers later. Peace.